Technocrats allowed. Why? Because we've got a country to save. Join me, Larry Elder, tonight starting at 7 on AM 560, The Answer.
Dan and Amy, and that story that Mike Scott was reporting about that veterans home in Quincy. Good reporting, WBEZ, Dave McKinney and Tony Arnold on this. Since July of 2015, 13 residents of that home in Quincy have died from Legionnaire's disease.
Oh, my gosh.
11 families now suing the state for negligence. Legionnaire's, this is a matter of, cleanliness at the facility.
Yeah. They don't have a fountain in that facility either.
So, we've spent a lot of time, and rightly so, talking about VA hospitals and their failure to provide the service and the medical care that our veterans are guaranteed and have earned. We seem to have the same thing going on in the state, and Governor Ronner, where is he? Jeannie Ives saying that if the governor can't manage a 200-acre facility with 250 clients, then he really isn't in charge, as he has previously said. This is big. This is a big issue. The state at the state level failing our military men and women. There's also another seeming failure going on. Have you noticed since the allegations started, allegations of sexual misconduct against high-profile individuals in media and entertainment and politics, since they started, we were expecting the floodgates would open in Illinois, too.
Yeah, because there are so many rumblings of people who wanted to tell their stories, but we've only had one person really publicly come forward.
Well, right. You had 300 women sign a letter.
I know.
And we've had one woman so far in testimony at a hearing for a specific piece of legislation make an accusation about a specific politician, State Senator Ira Silverstein. Denise Rotheimer accusing Silverstein of pursuing her while she was trying to just pursue legislation on behalf of her daughter, who is a victim of a sexual crime. And the result of that was a couple things. One, without admitting any guilt, Silverstein was removed from Senate Democrat leadership and from his committee chairmanship. He's still in the Senate. And then two, we find out that Denise Rotheimer's complaint that she filed to the Legislative Inspector General's office last November hadn't been acted upon, because there is no
Legislative Inspector General.
There wasn't until 2 weeks ago. So, and then we find out from another legislator that there's more than 24 complaints of one nature or the other, some ostensibly including allegations of sexual misconduct by members of the General Assembly, that have also just laid there collecting dust. And so what's happened since these revelations? No one else has come forward. They hurry through legislation, mandatory sexual harassment training for all the legislators, but we don't have any action on the release of those complaints, even with the accusers' names redacted. And we don't have any action with respect to, are we waiving any time restrictions because of the General Assembly's failure to have a legislative inspector general, which was that purposeful, so they could have this kind of bipartisan combine, hat tip John Cass, non-aggression pact. If you allow us to protect our bad actors, we'll allow you to protect your bad actors. Is that what's going on? What's going on? There's a task force, a House task force that has had hearings. So where are we? For more on this topic, we are now going to talk to the one woman who has come forward, who made those accusations against State Senator Ira Silverstein. She is Denise Rotheimer. Denise, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
So there's been a couple of sexual harassment task force hearings. Have you participated in those hearings?
I believe those are closed to the public. I've watched them online. So I've listened to the hearings.
Well, why didn't you go before that task force to tell your story?
They won't allow me because I'm an active case. And so being an active case, I can't even speak with the members on the Ethics Commission, which I understand. So as an alternative to be heard, I've been trying to reach out to Leader Durkin and express the concerns I have while going through this process, because what I've learned since testifying at that hearing for prohibiting sexual harassment, that I have no rights. And it's very scary to be put in a situation that I was once in back in 2003 when my daughter was raped. And I don't want to go through that kind of trauma being railroaded again. So
well, just
I'm not.
but on the Legislative Ethics Commission. So let me understand, the Legislative Ethics Commission, are they charged with making recommendations to the Legislative Inspector General for pursuing investigations?
Well, how the process works is they get the complaint. Then they give the authority to the Legislative Inspector General to investigate. So the Legislative Inspector General has to get approval from the Legislative Ethics Commission to investigate, which no other agency has to do. Legislative Inspector Generals of the other state agencies like Treasurer's Office, Comptroller, Governor, they can just investigate a complaint they receive. My complaint was actually referred by the Executive Inspector General's Office of the Governor to Senate President Cullerton. It didn't even get to the Legislative Ethics Commission. It was first handed to him. And then he said, after my testimony and all that, that they referred it to the Legislative Inspector General, knowing there was no one there.
This is like the game that Congress is playing.
Yeah, but this seems worse and seems a little more unorganized. So how many times have you had to testify or tell your story to people?
Well, back in November of 2016, I went directly to Cullerton's office. Mm-hmm. And when I was being ignored on a status of my complaint, I went to my state senator. She then stopped, returning my call or giving me any follow-up. So really, I just was silenced way back then until I testified for Senate Bill 402 on Halloween in support of that bill. And I briefly touched on, my experience to support for that bill. And then after that, they got the Inspector General. I met with her for 2.5 hours. I wasn't comfortable in the situation because I'm already not trusting anyone for obvious reasons. And so she just kind of confirmed for me that I need to have my own voice. So I'm trying to figure out how can I be heard by the Legislative Ethics Commission, who actually determines the outcome of the case. So
well, how do they do that without hearing from the accuser?
Well, that's the thing. I read the operational rules. It's about 13 pages long. Not one word is mentioned in there about the complainant or the accuser. So there was never an intent to give a voice to the person actually making the complaint.
Well, that's remarkable. I mean, it's absurd because not only because you should hear from the accuser and be able to query the accuser, but also in your case, it's not like you're asking for any special treatment. I don't want my name disclosed. I don't want anybody in the room. I want this to be closed to the public. You say, I'm Denise Rotheimer. I've got this complaint. I've been trying to pursue this complaint for a year through all these avenues. I've been given the runaround. I just want to testify to what happened to me before this commission, and I'm there to answer questions, and they're uninterested. I mean, what is that?
Well, they don't even want to hear it is the point, just like they didn't want to do anything about the complaint I filed last year. All spring session, even up until Senate Bill 402 was authored and filed by Senate President Cullerton, there was no intention of even filling the vacancy, knowing there was a live active complaint. They didn't even want to go there. It was only because I spoke out that they had no choice. So I'm not under the impression that they care or take my complaint seriously at all. Well, because if they did, they would have filled the vacancy before they did Senate Bill 402.
Well, what do you think should happen to State Senator Ira Silverstein over what he did with you?
I think we should both have a right to due process. He is afforded already the right to due process. He has rights. He gets representation. He even has relief. So there's an appeal. If he does get fined for any reason, he can appeal that. I get absolutely nothing. So what I would like to see happen is a fair playing field. Let me have an opportunity to be heard. It's very important that I'm heard, and it's also important to be cross-examined, to have them ask any questions, because you're not going to know the hostile environment that I was in until you hear from me.
I'll tell you, this is just here's what I think is happening.
It's a hot mess.
Here's what I think is happening. I think this is fairly straightforward because these people down there are not that smart. Sexual harassment training will mandate that. We'll rush through some legislation, and then now that we've got called out on not having a legislative inspector general, we'll put somebody in that post. Keep the complaints that have been sitting there untended to for a year. Just keep those behind closed doors, push those off. At least let's get past March, and then they'll say at least let's get past November, because this is just about protecting everybody's hindquarters for elections. And you don't go after names that have been rumored about, and we won't go after names on your side that have been rumored about. And, we'll just kind of protect everybody, close ranks. If Denise calls, don't answer. Her Democrat state senator won't answer. The House Republican leader won't answer. This is the bipartisan combine self-survival so that the floodgates do not open and that all of the bad actors down there, and it's not just Ira Silverstein, I can guarantee you that.
Right.
So all of them are protected, and they find maybe a way at some point to, quietly move on without really being held to account. That's what I think is happening.
If they really wanted people to speak out and come forward and go through this process, they would afford them with some basic rights. A right to notification, a right to information, a right to some level of participation, even a right to representation. We have absolutely, as complainants, zero. So my first conversation with Julie Porter, I asked her, I said, what rights do I have? She said, none that I can think of. I called Legal Jerkin's office. I said, can you explain to me why I'm going through a process that does not afford me any rights? And he said, I understand what you're saying. I don't have an answer to your question.
Yeah.
He referred me to the operational rules.
Yeah, I mean, this is like what's happening in Congress. You have to go through all these hoops because they want to frustrate you, they want to tire you out. The only thing we don't have, or we don't know we have yet, maybe, are these secret, clandestine, taxpayer-funded sexual harassment settlements. We'll see if those ultimately are a part of this story in Illinois, like they are nationally as well. Denise, thanks so much for joining us and for your continued willingness to publicly speak out and try and break this thing loose, because there's another 24 complaints that we should see. Absolutely. Denise Rotheimer, victim rights advocate. We appreciate your time, and we'll continue on this story. Thanks for joining us, Denise.
Thank you. You have a good day.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.